Cordarrelle Patterson is kind of one of those guys that's just a freak athlete, but you don't really know what kind of position he should play. I mean, he was basically just a return specialist for Minnesota, and he was very good at that. But when he went over to New England, that's when his talents really shined, and he was really able to be very effective. One way he's able to help is on a play like this. If you take a look, it's going to be a cover one hole, and that's where Patterson is on the screen. Now, Patterson's going to be running deep here, but one thing to take a look at is take a look at that safety who's deep. He's actually going to be looking up to the top half of the screen, which now means that Patterson basically has one-on-one coverage all across the field. He has basically free range and only one man to beat. But also, if you notice, he's basically just running straight to the right side of the screen. So this now means that Miami defender is obviously expecting him to continue running in that direction. However, look at how swiftly he just cuts over to the middle of the screen. I mean, he's basically able to do that without changing any of his speed whatsoever. He's still going at top speed while being able to cut, and that's what makes him so effective. Not only is he insanely fast, but he can change direction with that speed. And that can actually really open up the playbook for an offensive coordinator. Like if you take a look at this play, it's going to be a cover 2 zone, and what New England is going to do is send a receiver running deep down there. Doing this will force Miami Dolphins to focus on that receiver. They also have another receiver running a go route right there, and they're going to have one under 2 halfbacks in the game cut to the bottom half of the screen and also run to the bottom half of the screen. That will then force another Miami Dolphin deep, and now this means that Patterson can simply cut right there and be open underneath all of it. Patterson now is completely alone with nobody around him, and obviously, as we all know, he's great in open space, so when he does make the catch, he's able to pick up plenty of yards. Having that ability to move in open space and being able to get around tackles and pick up as many yards as possible is something that's really valuable, but also very interesting, because it's not something that definitely happens on every play. It's not like every single play you get a guy in open space, because half of the goal is just to get guys in open space to begin with. So that's kind of what makes Patterson an interesting player, because he's definitely not the best wide receiver just as a whole. There's absolutely better route runners out there than him. However, if he can get into that open space, he can do a lot of damage. So that's why a play like this can be very crucial, because it can kind of get him into open space just by a good play design as opposed to him having a good play on his own. And again, not to say that he can't have good plays on his own, of course he can. If you're in the NFL and you're a wide receiver, you can have good plays on your own. But good coaching can make things easier for him. That's kind of one of the things that was lacking when he was in Minnesota, is no one really planned to use his skill set to their advantage. And of course, the whole Patriots way is building your team around the players, not building your players around your own scheme. And so that's why they were able to use Patterson in such an effective way. And given that Nagy does a lot of that kind of thing as well, I definitely think it would be a very good fit for him in Chicago. He can also be effective on plays like this. If you take a look at the bottom half of the screen, it is going to be man coverage. So then what New England is going to do is send a receiver out to block the defensive back who's in charge of covering Patterson, and then Patterson can simply run that route right there. It works out perfectly, and now Patterson is wide open, but that part's not too impressive, right? I mean, plenty of receivers would be able to get open on a play like this. However, take a look at what Patterson is able to do after he's in open field. At this point, the safety has run over to cut him off, and so what most players would do is just continue running down the sideline and try to pick up as many yards as possible. But Patterson is so good at moving left to right while keeping that top speed that he's able to cut back into the middle of the field and is able to take it all the way for a touchdown. While he can be effective in the passing game, really one of the things that makes him so great is his ability to return kickoffs. So much of being a kick returner is basically seeing where the hole is open and running to the hole as quick as possible. As of right now, he does have a lead blocker right in front of him, and typically where you want to go is in one of those two directions. He's supposed to go to the left side of the screen, however there isn't really a lot open there. But if you look to the right side of the screen, there actually is something interesting developing. The two bears who are in position to make a tackle are already getting blocked, and there's another bear in area, however that's a kicker. So Patterson's going to test his luck and try to run that way as well. This works out already. As of right now, this play has worked out. There is another bear in the area, but he was able to run up and probably will get to the 30-yard line, which is still a good run. You know, basically the mindset is anything past the 25 is a good kickoff return. However, look at what he's able to do here. While going full speed, he's able to slow down enough to avoid that tackle and then get back up to his full speed to run past the kicker. Granted, it was just a kicker, but that's still an incredibly athletic play. I mean, to be able to control your momentum like that is really not easy, but he kind of made it look easy. He's probably the best kick returner in the game, and in fact, I would actually say he is the best kick returner in the game. There's better punt returners than him, but when it comes to kick returners, he's just on another level. As you see on this one, the kick is actually going to be on the ground quite a bit and bounces a bit, and Patterson doesn't pick it up cleanly. So this should be bad news, as he's currently at the 7-yard line, meanwhile there's Raiders already at the 30. So as you would think, if they meet in the middle, this means that he should get tackled underneath the 20, which is not a good run at all. But one thing worth noting is it's actually designed to be a run to the right side of the screen. So take a look at those two Vikings right there. They're actually not going to be blocking straight up, but instead running to the right side of the screen to block over there. But there is a problem, and it's that there is a Raider who's doing a very good job on this play. He's doing a very good job of taking away that right side of the screen. So if Patterson does just cut around to the sideline instantly, then he would just get tackled by that Raider. So what Patterson is instead going to do is basically cut closer to the middle of the screen. This allows him to get by that Raider, but now he has to cut back over to the right side of the screen and run very quickly. He definitely can't take his time because there are 2 Raiders fastly approaching him. So he basically has to continue running at his full speed while making several cuts. However, Patterson is able to do that. And since Minnesota was able to do a good job of blocking on the edge, once he gets past the line, he is able to run over and get into the end zone for a touchdown. There's also one more I want to talk about, and this one's pretty simple. If you look at those 2 Vikings right there, basically what they're going to try to do is stay close to each other and then block 2 defenders away from each other. So now it's working out pretty well. As you see, that Viking does a very good job of winning his one-on-one matchup, and meanwhile there's 2 Vikings who can double team another defender right over there. But the problem, of course, is there is another player who's crashing in, so Patterson has to get through that hole as quickly as he possibly can. It becomes a foot race, but Patterson isn't the type of guy who loses many foot races. He gets past that initial gap, but now there's another problem forming. The Minnesota Viking over there didn't do a great job of pushing that defender away from the gap that was supposed to form, so now Patterson's basically going to have to cut to the right side of the screen. He's going to have to cut over to the right side of the screen, and not just do that, but do it while maintaining his top speed, because on a kick return, once you slow down, it's all over. There's too many guys around, and if you don't go fast enough, someone will easily be able to make a tackle. But he is able to cut back to the outside, and then he even cuts back to the inside afterwards just for fun, and he's able to run all the way for another touchdown. That's what Patterson brings to the kick return game, is his ability to run at a top speed and be able to move while running at that top speed. But there's one more way New England liked to use him last season, and that was in the running game. This play is a good example of how he can be effective in the running game. If you take a look, the left tackle and left guard are going to be double teaming that Packers interior lineman, and then the left tackle is actually going to move up to block a linebacker. Another Patriot will go out to block that Packer right there, and then they'll send their fullback out to block another Packer, and then it can simply just pitch it to Patterson, who should be able to run deep down the field. At this point, everyone has kind of made their blocks, however, it kind of happens a little bit slower than you would want it to. Really, one of the key problems for New England was the Packers interior linemen did a great job of winning their one-on-one matchups. As you see, the offensive and defensive linemen are all pretty much on the bottom half of the hash marks, which is notable considering the fact that this ball was actually snapped from the top half of the hash mark, so there's not a lot of space for Patterson to work with here. So those 2 guys are in good position to be making those blocks, however Patterson just doesn't have the space that he would like to have. However, there is one thing worth noting, and it's the fact that those Packers are going to the bottom half of the screen. So Patterson is able to cut back in, pick up a decent amount of yards, and pick up the first down while he's at it. He can also be effective on plays like this. If you take a look, there is going to be one-on-one matchups all across the board, and then what New England is going to do is send a center out to block that Packer safety, and then their fullback will go up to block the initial linebacker. Now typically Patterson would just run straight up the middle and pick up a few yards. However, he trusts himself to be able to move in open space, and for good reason, as I've shown before. Since there is a Packer who did a good job of moving in that area, he's going to want to go around him. Now Hogan doesn't make a perfect block on this one, and that's understandable since he wasn't aware Patterson was going to break to the outside. But even a Packer who did get a hand on him was only able to just get a hand on him, and that just slowed him down. That didn't get him to full tackle. It might not have gone for a touchdown, but it gained a lot more yards than it would have had Patterson just ran straight up the middle. This one was also another interesting one. If you take a look at what New England is going to do, is they're going to have all their offensive linemen have one-on-one matchups on the right side of the screen, and then they're going to send James Devlin out to block a linebacker right there. Also, if you notice, all these plays have a fullback in the game, and for good reason. With Patterson's ability to shift, it gives you a lot more of an advantage if you have more space, and having a fullback gives you more space. So at this point, Patterson is running to the right side of the screen, and Devlin is running up to block that Packer. But it's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, Patterson has basically caught up to Devlin at this point. So what Patterson is basically going to do is fake as though he's going straight up the middle and then fake over to the right side of the screen. It's a small move, but it gives Devlin that just a little bit of extra time that he needs to go over and make sure he completes the block. And Patterson does have the footwork to do it, so he's not too worried about potentially getting tackled. But if you notice in a lot of those plays, there was a lot of really good blocking, but that's not the only way Patterson can be effective. Patterson does have a great ability to turn what should be a 5-yard run into an 8-yard run, and what should be an 8-yard run into a 15-yard run. This play is a good example. It's going to be a jet sweep, and so Patterson is running to the bottom half of the screen. Now if you notice, a defensive end does a very good job of getting in that area. Patterson is still quick enough and fast enough to get around him, however now he's farther back, and it's going to take him longer to get around to that edge. Because of that extra time, this now allows another build to get into the area. So what Patterson is able to do is simply just juke him out and then run for more yards. Bill Belichick's mindset has clearly always been, I'm not going to look for someone who's good at everything, I'm going to look for someone who's great at one thing. And Patterson really is so dominant as his specific strengths. I mean, this is clearly a guy who just has a ton of talent. The only reason he's no longer in New England is just because Chicago paid him more money. And even though it comes to the money situation, I still don't hate the contract at all. I mean, 2 years for $10 million or $5 million a year for the next 2 years is seemingly a little bit high for a guy who really specializes as a return specialist. But I do think he is a guy that, if they use him correctly, can absolutely be worth that $5 million. And also, of course, when you're talking about these things, the key is never just what the actual money is, but what's the guaranteed money. Usually, guaranteed money only really matters in case of an injury, but when it comes to the case of Cordarrelle Patterson, it's very different. Because he does have unique talents, this does mean that Chicago has a bit of question marks going into this season about whether or not he's going to be good or not. And while his first season is fully guaranteed, as most first seasons in a contract are, next year they can cut him for only a $500,000 cap hit. It's a very low-risk move, and Chicago definitely does need to improve their offense, so I like the move. And I also think he'll fit well in that Chicago offense. I mean, Matt Nagy is a very creative play caller, and I definitely think he'll find ways to work Patterson into their offense. And if nothing else, you got a great kick returner, so either way, he's definitely a guy you want on your team.